Hey guys, Saf back with another video today, not normally doing 2 videos in one day. We have had the new Fusion announcement as I expected it to be coming either today or on Monday. This will be the Halloween Fusion for this year, and normally there's quite a lot of fun events that happen around Halloween. We sometimes get a guaranteed champion on a training tournament. I think we had Madame Cerise last time. They bring back some of the old Halloweens. Champions, but this time round we've got a brand new champion. It is a traditional fusion, so we can expect some epics, maybe some rares as well in the mix, and sometimes those epics and rares are actually quite good as well if we can pick up a duplicate. But what have we got here? We have got Morrigaine. She is an undead hordes. Why do we need an undead hordes? Why can't we have more high elves, more shadowkin? But hey, it's an undead horde. Legendary magic support champion. So let's have a look at the champion here. She looks freaking cool. Looks like some sort of wood elf corrupted, something out of like Total War Warhammer. Looks really cool. Let's have a look at the kit then. Let's see what this champion can do. So we've got an A1, attacks one enemy, haunt with hesitation, has a 50% chance, up to 70% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed for 2 turns. Okay, it's a single target. Single target decreased speed is good for things like Iron Twins, but it's not 100%, whereas you could literally just run a Kurzad and it'll do the job better because it's 100% chance. Then we've got Shriek of the Banshee, 4-turn cooldown, has a 75% chance of stealing all buffs from a target enemy, also has a 75% chance of placing a true fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn, will place a 50% decrease accuracy debuff for 2 turns if the target is a boss. It's good that we've got a different mechanic for a boss because I think a lot of the times they forget that things can't work on bosses. Look at the champion like Fortis, great example. Everything requires fear, but none of the bosses can be feared, so therefore he only works for waves, which means you limit all of his kind of long fighting capabilities, which is where his kit feels like it needs to go. It needs to be on an extended fight. So it's good that we've got an alternative here. It's only a single target full buff steal. Okay, so that's not too bad. However, in Arena, that's kind of useless anyway because Polymorph has kind of dominated the buff stealing scene. So you're not really going to be stealing any buffs in Arena with this ability. True Fear on all enemies. Okay, if we think Arena, that's not very useful because you can't place debuffs. But for PvE content, that's not terrible. It's a 100% chance when booked for 1 turn. There aren't that many True Fear champions out there. I think obviously the one that everyone would naturally go towards is Mashaled. But hey, it's a control champion. I prefer some of the provokers, and we've had a lot of provokers lately in terms of Bivold. You get more guaranteed control, or someone who can freeze, or someone who can stun. So if we're looking at like a tier list of control on a progression level, Fear is probably one of the last ones you go towards. You'd much prefer something like a provoke or a stun. Then you go into something like a True Fear, because True Fear is not 100% chance to control the enemy. The decrease accuracy debuff is nice on many bosses. Iron Twins is very good for Bommel. But again, it's a 4-turn cooldown, book to 3, so it's a 3 on a 2. So you've got to keep that in mind. You can't sustain it 100% of the time unless you're going on a 2-1 ratio. Then on the A3, we have a 5-turn cooldown. Has a 75% chance, book to 100%, of decreasing the turn meters of all enemies by 20%, fills the turn meters of all allies by 20%, and places a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. Okay, so that's quite a lot of turn meter. That's a big chunk of turn meter. Now, my initial disappointment with this skill, it's a 4-turn cooldown when booked. This immediately removes it from any use in the clan boss because most teams require a 3-turn cooldown, or you have to do kind of like some really complicated 4-3 mechanics, and it just doesn't work. Most unkillable teams want to run 2-1, and if you want to run 2-1, you normally want to have a 3-turn cooldown, ideally, for this ability. But 4-turn with a 2-turn buff is okay. So it's not as good as Lysandra. She does a 30% steal, a 30% fill, and a 30% increased speed. Way stronger. It's not as good a decrease as someone like Vladimir or Sylar, who can decrease more turn meter, but obviously they can't boost your team. But in terms of an actual turn meter manipulation injection, it's quite insane. However, remember for Arena, you can't turn meter control Stone Skin. So it's not as good as it sounds for Arena. But for PvE, if you need a lot of turn meter, pretty good ability. And then we've got a passive, She Who Is Death. At the start of each turn, places a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns on the enemy with the lowest HP. This debuff cannot be removed, transferred, spread, or have its duration increased or decreased by enemies or allies. So this is an interesting passive. Firstly, we actually have support for protected debuffs. So why can't we have a protected debuff artifact set or blessing, Plarium? I'm making a political stand for office. Please, can we have protected debuffs? It is so difficult, firstly, to even place a debuff, but then to keep that debuff on a target, especially in an arena setting, is so difficult. Let's have that opportunity to have protected debuffs. It will shake up the game. But anyway, this is a protected heal reduction. Now, heal reduction as a debuff is pretty lame in PvE. PvE-wise, there's really not many bosses that you care about. If you can't keep the finite's turn meter down, then maybe you would have use there, but a lot of end game teams, late game teams will have an allure. This is quite good early game in finite if you need kind of like the heal reduction. However, I would say she only has a single attacking ability. There is no other attacks in this ability, so for Fire Knight, it's kind of a bit of a negative. You need multi-hitters. She hits once on one ability of 3, so she's barely going to hit that shield. Which means if you are struggling to keep the shield down, it's even worse because you need to reapply those hits. It's a bit of a problem. But that's the only boss that I can really think of off the top of my head where heal reduction actually matters. Maybe in Hydra if the Hydra heads are stealing continuous heals, but if that's the case, you've probably got bigger problems on your hands. I can't really think of any other boss that heal reduction is actually that important for. Probably Agreth maybe, but again, it's more likely to go on the target of lowest HP, which means it's going to go on the Spiderling. The other thing that this doesn't say is it won't go and jump to the next lowest if there's already heal reduction. At the start of each turn, places 100% debuff on the enemy with the lowest HP. So that basically means if the lowest HP is still alive and he has heal reduction, there's only ever one target with this on. That's what I'm reading into this ability. Now, if it was to jump to the next target, then you could make a really fast Morrigaine here and actually just keep constantly heal reduction people that can't be removed. And eventually you will overcome some of these super tanky teams in Arena. I don't see any use for this passive in this game. Beyond making the DPS champion in a tanky team that's taken a bit of damage not be able to heal, I can't see any use for this ability because, you know, you're going to kill that champion. Unless you block revive, it's going to get revived and you're back to where you were at square one. You could make a really fast Morrigaine and eventually, you know, get 1 or 2 out. If it jumped to different targets, that would be cool. The other thing you can't do is you can't extend it. So if you run it for 1 turn, it's on 1 turn cooldown left. It's not going to reapply it back to 2 turns. It's just going to wait for it to run out. So you can't keep it up all the time. There'll be a gap in which that enemy will be able to heal. So yeah, I'm not really sure about this passive, to be honest. I think I can understand the concept. Pick the target, stop them from being able to heal. But in reality, I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where this is going to be applied, because in an arena setting, applying debuffs is almost impossible. Most people have their DPS protected under Necret the Great, which means when are you ever going to apply this debuff? In 3v3, there's lots of cleansers, Wither the Crowned. There's loads of champions that can stop this from happening. Stone Skin will stop it from happening. So you have to deal with that first. Then once you get it on, you can't really do it much else with it because it's stuck there. So I don't really know about that. She's all about this A3 for me. And to be honest, does she actually add much more value over someone like a Deacon Armstrong? That's my concern here with this champion. It's legendary. The amount of books you need is quite low, which is good. She does have a 19% aura in all battles. But if you think Deacon has a 15% drop, 15% increase with a decreased defense and a leech, that's pretty strong. And it's an epic champion. If I'm thinking of other turn meter manipulators, obviously everyone gets a free Arbiter. That's 30% increase. If you get a Lysandra, you would use Lysandra over this champion. Sylar gives you more turn meter control on the enemy because you apply decreased speed on all enemies. Would you use this champion in Iron Twins? Probably not, because you can, if you're needing decreased speed, there are better options to guarantee decreased speed being applied due to the passive. Kurzad will 100% apply decreased speed on an A1 if he crits. Unless he has a decreased crit rate buff on him, he's always going to crit, so he always applies decreased speed. And if you don't have decreased speed on it causes problems. So if you low roll that 70% multiple times, your run is going to fail. Decreased accuracy is nice to have, but there are other decreased accuracy champions out there that you get for free. Eventually, people will pick up Tyre, decreased accuracy champion. There are other decreased accuracy champions being added all the time. There are epics and rares and uncommons that you can use for this. So my overall opinion of this champion, it's a traditional fusion. I will probably go for it because I even went for Marinix when loads of people didn't, but I don't think anyone should be stressing about getting this champion. I think this champion is at best a glorified turn meter manipulator, and there are epics and other champions that can do the jobs they're trying to suggest this champion can do better. There are better Iron Twins champions. There are better turn meter manipulators than this champion. The passive is never going to be a reality in which you need it. So that's my verdict. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this champion. Are you excited? Does this champion fill a gap in your roster that I haven't thought about? I could be wrong about this champion. I'll be looking at other content creators and your comments to see what people think about her. But so far, that's my initial impression looking at this champion. Not one that I would be desperate to acquire. Obviously, I don't have access to any test servers, so I'll have to wait until I get this champion to actually play test it in further. Until then, until I have more information, I will catch you in the next video.